Naruto exclusive videos lemon come out on my boosty. You can watch and subscribe. Link in the description, like the video and write a comment, enjoy watching. Description: Can a child growing up without maternal love and paternal care become kind? Chapter 1. There is a story hidden in every blade, and a shadow of fate in every decision. When a stranger shows the way, he does not simply lead, he opens a gate to the unknown. A blond boy ran through the dark alleys of the Hidden Leaf Village. It seemed like a normal situation, when children played various entertaining games, competing in speed and agility. But today was not quite an ordinary day. It was the day of victory over the nine-tailed demon fox, the day when the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, entered into battle with the strongest tailed beast and defeated it, sealing it in a baby. With this action, he crossed out all chances for a happy life for the child at the root. Today Naruto was kicked out of the orphanage onto the street. This happened every day, but on this particular day, October 10th, the orphanage doors did not open at night. When the boy first encountered this, he simply thought that he would wait until the morning at the entrance. But not everything was so simple. A crowd of villagers, in whose veins the memory of the dead flowed mixed with alcohol, came for his soul. They did not care whether he was the incarnation of the Kyuubi or not. These people, desperate with grief, needed a scapegoat, and the one who was a direct participant in history became it. They simply could not blame their ruler for the death of his loved ones. He fought bravely for the village and almost died. Naruto was hospitalized for the first time exactly 2 years ago, when he was only 4 years old. Yes, the boy was talented and developed quickly. He learned to read and write quite early, and without the help of adults. The teachers at the orphanage were actually kind, but under the pressure of society, they were afraid to leave Naruto within the walls of the orphanage. The boy did not know about it, but on the 3rd day of his birth, the inhabitants practically broke through the walls of the orphanage. Only luck saved all the orphans and teachers from retribution, so they could not risk it anymore. They visited him in the hospital, and the hearts of the teachers bled at the sight of the child, but they could not do anything. "I have to run, otherwise they'll break all my bones again. I don't want to go through that," Naruto thought. Even though he'd spent the last year focusing on his physical fitness, it wasn't enough. The boy was afraid to go out on the streets, where he was often insulted and sometimes even stoned. "What bad luck!" the child cursed when he reached a dead end. Maintaining constant breathing and monitoring his surroundings was already a difficult task for a child, so it was not surprising that he simply forgot about the road. Yes, if it had been an ordinary path that he occasionally walked along, then he would have had no problems, but the residents had approached the capture of the demon with unusual responsibility, setting up an ambush for him along this path. "What should I do?" Naruto began to look around, frantically thinking about how to get out of this difficult situation. It was then that the boy's gaze fell upon a small window, which was located quite low. Without further hesitation, he jumped into it. There was no time to think, because the residents had already caught up with him. After making several awkward somersaults, Naruto finally stopped. "Where am I?" Rubbing the bruised spot on his arm, the boy tried to make out at least something in the semi-darkness of the dark room. To be honest, he felt creepy as soon as he realized how dark it was. "What are you doing here, little one?" An unpleasant male voice echoed from all sides, forcing Naruto to press his back against the wall. Along with this voice, a strange stench spread throughout the basement, blocking the child's breathing. For a moment, breathing became simply impossible. "Sorry. I accidentally." Naruto's voice trembled with horror, and his heart was pounding as if he had run several kilometers without stopping. The boy had never encountered anything like this before. Yes, he was scared when they started hunting him, but it was a conscious fear of the future that awaited him if he did nothing. But here everything was different. It seemed as if the hand of Shinigami himself was squeezing his small neck, not allowing him to breathe fresh air. "Accidentally broke into my abode? Hee hee. Even if I were a complete idiot, I wouldn't believe this nonsense." The voice seemed to mock the poor child. For a few seconds, the oppressive aura disappeared, allowing Naruto to come to his senses. He slid down the wall, greedily gulping in air. Look! There's a demon in this building. One of Naruto's pursuers noticed a small window, where an adult would hardly be able to crawl even if he wanted to. Because the child leaned against the wall in terror, the moonlight was able to illuminate him. Haha, so that's it. I thought you were some kind of thief, but you're just a pathetic coward. The owner of this basement was clearly amused by the changed expression on the face of his uninvited guest. How can you say that? A cry of pain and despair began to rise from the depths of Naruto's soul. The boy simply did not understand what could be funny about this. They were trying to kill him, and the owner of this place, as if the last one, was mocking him. How could this be? They will come for you too. I will personally tell them that it was you who hit me. Naruto was already in despair. He knew perfectly well that he could not escape from this dark and damp basement. The boy did not know where the exit was, but if the inhabitants knew that he was here, they would get to him. Hee, will they come for me? Kill me? How many times have I heard this? At that moment, two scarlet eyes lit up in the darkness, emitting incredible killing intent. Naruto turned pale from this, and beads of sweat began to accumulate on his forehead. Remember, little one, either you kill or you are killed. The choice is quite simple. So who are you? A person trembling in fear of danger, or a person fighting for his life? The unknown person's voice became serious. There was no more mockery in it, and two scarlet eyes focused their attention on Naruto, waiting for an answer. The boy clenched his teeth, trying with all his might to resist this mental pressure from the basement owner. I will fight for my life. Naruto's voice was not childish at all, and steel flashed in his blue eyes. The fear filling his heart gradually began to recede, and an unfamiliar feeling for Naruto began to spread inside. It was determination. Ha! Now that's a different story. The stranger clearly liked the youth's words. Red eyes flashed with interest in the child who had disturbed him. Then something whistled past Naruto's ear, and he involuntarily turned around. Can I? The boy blurted out with a bit of surprise, taking the ninja's cold weapon out of the wall. He had seen it many times in stores and training grounds, but this was the first time Naruto held this dangerous weapon in his hands. To survive, you must kill, little one. Climb through the window and deal with the 3 people who were chasing you. The boy looked up at the supposed place of the interlocutor, but the scarlet eyes were no longer there. And how am I supposed to do that? Naruto turned to the window, located 2 meters above, and then frowned. This was far from his first communication outside the shelter. Last year, when he went out for a walk, he ran into someone. Walking through the dark alleys, the blonde was a little nervous. Yes, he could move along the streets of the village, but there were a lot of people there. The residents, to put it mildly, did not like him, but the hardest thing for him was to withstand dozens of glances burning into him from all sides. This put an unpleasant pressure on Naruto, so he preferred to avoid too crowded places. But moving through dark alleys was also quite dangerous. What kind of rats can you meet in the dark corners of the gateway? It was because of this that Naruto remained extremely vigilant, trying to move quietly and extremely carefully. But you can't either. You're too fast. A gentle girl's voice was heard nearby, making Naruto freeze. His heart began to beat faster than usual, and interest appeared inside. He couldn't resist and turned off his more or less safe path. A few turns and a minute of wasted time, and Naruto found himself on a playground, where 2 girls were playing in the sandbox. One had pink hair, and the other had blonde hair. Hi, my name is Naruto. Let's be friends. The boy resolutely approached the girls, wanting to play with them. In fact, Naruto did not know what friendship was, but several times he witnessed how other children his age started a conversation with their peers like that. In fact, the boy was given a separate room at the orphanage. At first, Naruto thought it was very cool, but the next day he began to feel a lack of communication. Children's toys diluted his loneliness, but they quickly became boring. That's when the boy asked the teacher for a book for the first time. Reading did not immediately begin to bring him pleasure. Learning the alphabet was not a problem, but learning to understand combinations of different symbols without the help of adults was already difficult. Slowly and gradually, Naruto began to immerse himself in books, completely forgetting about the world around him. Probably, if not for the incident on his 4th birthday, he would have stayed at home. Ugh, what's wrong with your clothes? The pink-haired girl immediately backed away from Naruto, noticing that his clothes were dirty and tattered. The boy pursed his lip, taking these words as a negative answer. Sorry. Naruto felt tears welling up in his eyes and simply rushed into the dark alley. This was his first attempt to establish a relationship with someone of his peers. The thing was that the attic where he lived had a good view of the playground in front of the orphanage. Children frolicked there day after day. Watching them, he wanted to understand why they looked so happy. The teachers did not let him out of the building because they were afraid of the villagers showing aggression towards the orphanage. Other children could also get in the way, so they preferred to keep Naruto in the attic. Sakura, why are you doing this? The friend looked at the neat Sakura with a bit of irritation, then turned her gaze to the side where Naruto was running. Wait, Naruto. My name is Ino. The blonde tried to stop the fast boy, but he had already disappeared around the corner of a dark alley. Running further was against the rules that her father had instilled in her since childhood, so she decided to return to the sandbox. Running his gaze along the wall illuminated by the moonlight, Naruto noticed that the brickwork was not so even. Taking a small run up, he began to push off from one ledge to another, having calculated the trajectory of his movement in advance. Everything would have been fine if one of the protruding bricks had not been cracked. When the boy transferred the weight of his small body to it, a creaking sound was heard throughout the basement. Ouch! Naruto fell, hitting his back painfully on the concrete surface. Everything swam before his eyes, and his consciousness was ready to fade. I can't stay here. With an effort of will, the boy tore himself away from this edge. His gaze focused again. You need to be more careful. Having started to calculate a new trajectory of the ascent, Naruto more carefully chose the ledges he would step on. Let's go. Having finished with the planning, the boy rushed to the wall again. He acted quickly and did not hesitate, trying not to linger. His planning deserved praise, because he really reached the window leading to freedom. The boy was so happy about this that he lost concentration for a split second. His foot slipped off a protruding brick, and he began to fall on his back. Naruto would have ended up at the very bottom if someone's hand hadn't caught him. I caught the demon! One of the hunters shouted, dragging the boy outside and throwing him with all his might into the nearest wall. He was no ninja, but even that force was enough to make Naruto groan in pain. The small body slid down the wall, and then the boy fell to his knees. Everything before his eyes was swimming with pain. Take that! Some fat man without thinking kicked the kid in the chest with his small foot. Naruto even rose to his feet from the momentum, instinctively hugging himself with his hands. Several ribs seemed to crack, and tears were streaming from his eyes. Isn't that enough for you? Get on the ground now. The third drunk was the slowest, but hit harder than his comrades. A sharp male slap knocked out 2 of Naruto's teeth, causing bleeding. Leaning against the wall, the child was breathing heavily, but confidently clutching the handle of his kunai. So, who are you? A man trembling in fear of danger, or a man fighting for his life? The words from a recent conversation with a stranger immediately appeared in his head. Previously, Naruto would have curled up on the ground, clutching his head for at least some protection, but now everything was a little different. I have to fight. Otherwise, nothing will change. A gleam appeared in the child's blue eyes, completely uncharacteristic of children. Ha, look at this demon. He intends to kill us. The fat man laughed at this picture. He thought it was funny, because a small demon was trying to fight back against 3 grown men in their prime. His comrades supported him with friendly laughter. Naruto did not hear them. His ears were blocked by the rhythmic beating of his heart, and rage clouded his mind. He rushed forward, simply holding the kunai forward. It was very inept, but the child had the intention to kill a man. Aya! The panicked cry of the two men was heard as the fat man's body fell to the ground. The ground of the deserted alley was covered in blood. The handle of a kunai was sticking out of the man's forehead. The men backed away. Naruto stood on the man's corpse, catching his breath. His lungs were starved for air. The boy looked at his bloody hands, frantically trying to figure out what had happened. Did I kill him? Shock and disbelief gradually turned into panic. A strange lump rose in his throat, and as soon as Naruto opened his mouth, his dinner spilled onto the dead man. The liquid, foul-smelling substance made the boy close his eyes. At that moment, the child's entire world turned upside down. Run! The demon has awakened from a long sleep. One of the men shouted, breaking into a run. The drunkard hadn't even managed to take 3 steps when a curved blade flashed in the semi-darkness of the passage. A fountain of blood sprinkled the ground, and the man's head flew into a nearby trash can. The last hunter froze in place. He looked at the approaching figure, afraid to take an extra breath or blink. Wow! You're a little kid, but you have character, the stranger in the dark robe said, jingling his iron. The boy no longer heard him. The emotional pressure that the circumstances had put on him was too high. The peak of the whole action was the murder of a man. Yes, Naruto had not received the proper upbringing, but on some subconscious level he knew that killing his own kind was bad. The boy began to fall on the body of the dead fat man, but a thin hand caught him. The only remaining man watched this picture with awe in his soul. He had seen many things in his life, but this was too much for him. If it had not been for the yellow puddle that formed under the man, the stranger would not have paid attention to him. His nose was too sensitive. Oh, how could I forget about you, Mutt? Scarlet eyes flashed in the darkness, drawing attention to the unwanted witness. The pupils of the latter reflected the blade, which in the next moment cut the drunkard's skull into 2 halves. With the blonde on in hands, Unknown disappeared from Dark Alley. Only a few minutes had passed since they left, when a squad of ANBU appeared on the scene. There were 3 of them in total. Each was well trained and prepared for all sorts of unexpected events. This is very strange, said the ninja in the crow mask, who was the youngest of their group. They were carefully examining the basement, in which there were about 20 corpses. 5 Sharingans were examining the room for possible clues. I agree, such a brutal mass murder is happening for the first time within our village, the second ninja, who was wearing an owl mask, noted. That's not quite it, the third member of the group and part-time leader intervened in the conversation. This is the work of a real butcher. Most were killed with 1 blow with amazing precision. Moreover, none of the dead can be identified. The bodies are too mutilated, said the white-haired ninja, making a mental note that this matter should be taken under special control. Did one of the butchers of the mist infiltrate Konoha? The ANBU in the owl mask asked, clearly puzzled. Although he was quite young, he had participated in the last skirmishes of the Third Shinobi World War. Moreover, the 7 swordsmen of the mist were considered the most famous and bloodthirsty ninja in the world, so it was only logical that the shinobi thought of them first. It is quite possible, but we can't say for sure right now. We will need to conduct a full investigation and compare the traces. The leader of the group spoke in a monotonous voice, carefully examining one room after another. There was a small shelter in the basement. Most of the rooms looked abandoned, but someone definitely lived in one of them. There were several open cans of food, a couple of books on martial arts, and that's all. None of this could lead to the killer. Okay, there is no one here anymore. Raven, go to the base and call several support teams. We need to clear this place out so as not to create panic. Owl, walk around the area. Maybe we can find at least some clues outside. I will go to the Hokage-dano to report what happened. The masked ANBU quickly assessed the situation and made a decision on further action. Yes, the situation was quite unusual, but the rather experienced ninja did not lose his head. It will be done! The subordinates answered in unison, after which they disappeared from their places, using the body flicker to move quickly. The leader of the squad did not waste time either. The 7 swordsmen of the mist are here? No, that can't be. Constant patrols and thorough checks at the entrance to the village. Such shinobi are banned from entering any hidden village. Besides, it would be a violation of the peace agreements. Flashed through the thoughts of the experienced ninja. He had time to think about everything while he was moving to the Kage's residence. There is no need to dwell on the swordsman of the mist, because there are other dangerous and cruel ninja in the world. Yes, it is worth leaving the butchers of the mist on the list of suspects, but we need to act more flexibly. A crowd of 20 people was clearly seen by many people. We need to figure out why they went into the basement, and what they were doing in this area altogether. Ugh, I have a lot of work ahead of me. The masked dog Anbu had to interrupt his thoughts, because he had already reached his destination. Hokage Dano, permission to report. Falling to one knee as a sign of respect, the Anbu waited for permission from the leader of the entire village. Kakashi-kun, I told you that you can address me as sensei when we are alone. The fourth Hokage spoke with a tired smile, looking up from the pile of papers. Chapter 2. The savior does not always come with good intentions. Sometimes he is merely a mirror reflecting our weaknesses and pushing us to grow through severe trials. Naruto opened his eyes in his room at the orphanage. He instantly flew up from his place, looking around. Before losing consciousness, the boy heard a familiar voice. The recent events sent an unpleasant echo through his body with a shudder. Did I kill a man? This question was spinning in the child's head, making his whole body shudder. Naruto grabbed his head, trying to do the only thing he could after what happened accept this fact. But was it that easy? Stop disappointing me! Someone nearby barked in a displeased tone. The orphan turned around abruptly and fell off the bed in surprise. A tall young man with a pumped-up body was standing in the passage. He was wearing a dark robe, which only slightly hid his outstanding physical fitness. You! Naruto couldn't stop his voice from shaking. The man's appearance alone could be associated with such concepts as strength and power. What about those people who were chasing me? The question involuntarily flew out of his mouth before he could bite it. The man approached the orphan lying on the floor and squatted down, thereby showing that he did not want to look down on the child. So your name is Naruto? A question was heard in a firm voice, which made the boy involuntarily open his mouth. He was afraid to be in the same room with this person. My name is Keith Hatcher, and you can probably be congratulated, because from today on I am your guarantor. This extraordinary person said with a satisfied grin. Guarantor? You adopted me? Naruto jumped to his feet at the news. His little dream was to leave this gloomy orphanage. Yes, if he were an ordinary child, then everything would not be so bad. But because of his lifelong brand, he had to learn about the world from its cruelest side. Adopted? Hee, and I see no one explain anything to you here. Hatcher glanced towards the door, through the crack in which a pair of curious eyes were watching what was happening. What bitches, Keith growled more quietly, trying to contain his anger, but he was not doing very well. No, it all depends on the teachers. Not all of them are bad. The boy blocked the man's path to the door, noticing that he was too determined. Indeed, the young teachers treated him more positively. It was from them that he received books, food, and water. The more experienced teachers were distinguished by their superstition, which is why they believed that he was the real Kyuubi. It was they who often threw him out into the street, insulted and humiliated him. Hey kid, you're too kind for this cruel world, Keith said, ruffling the child's hair. This gesture, which the boy occasionally saw on the street, made him blush with embarrassment. It was the first time something like this had happened to him. What's wrong? Hatcher was a little displeased that Naruto had pulled away from him. His intense gaze did not exude malice or the desire to kill. There was an emotion in it that the child did not quite understand. Nothing! Naruto muttered under his breath, turning away. It was unusual for him to feel even such a seemingly ordinary manifestation of care towards him. I see. Anyway, pack your things. You're moving out of the orphanage and into an apartment. These words lit a spark of hope in the boy's eyes, with which he looked at his interlocutor. Let's hurry up. I'll explain everything to you on the way. Hatcher nodded, leaving the room. He wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk with these impudent teachers. It only took Naruto a minute to gather all of his things. It wasn't that the blonde was in a hurry, really. It was just that he didn't have much stuff, and most of it was books that were already stored in boxes. Keith was waiting for him at the exit, rubbing his hands with an unusual red handkerchief. It looked a little strange, but Naruto, overjoyed, didn't pay it much attention. Listen to me carefully, I just don't like to repeat myself, and even though you're small, I won't make exceptions. Naruto nodded confidently, feeling the man's intense gaze on him. I'm responsible for your life, but nothing more. I don't care how you survive and find money for food. The main thing is don't die. Hatcher briefly outlined the information. Wait. As far as I know, orphans are entitled to an allowance as soon as they leave the orphanage. The boy began with a frown. Some of the teachers didn't bother much with the books they gave him to read, so one time he got a book on behavior in the orphanage. That's where they told him about the allowance. Shut up, you're not as stupid as you seem, Keith grumbled like an old man, clearly planning to take the boy's small allowance for himself. Once a month I'll bring you money, but I'll warn you in advance. 5,000 rows is a very small amount. Even thrifty children won't have enough, and with your reputation, even less so. Okay. The blonde had not yet fully realized that it was simply not possible to live on 5,000 rows. It was not even that it was a small amount of money, but that the boy did not know how to manage money, because he did not know the exact prices in the stores and markets. I heard that you are into training. Is that so? Keith's voice suddenly lost all emotion, which was rather strange. His gaze was directed somewhere into the distance. He clearly saw something, but what exactly Naruto was not given to understand. Yeah, I was trying to increase my speed and endurance so that they wouldn't catch up with me. Naruto admitted honestly, not even thinking about lying about such things. Keith's face became sharper, and his lips twitched, spreading into a satisfied smile. It was as if he had been waiting for this. Then we'll go to the training ground first. A cruel voice echoed through the streets, causing many residents to take a few steps away from its source. Naruto felt goosebumps run down his spine, and a thought appeared in his head that perhaps he shouldn't have said that. 10 minutes later they were at the abandoned training ground. They had walked the entire way in rather tense silence. Hatcher quickly approached the tree, then turned to the boy. Speed and endurance are indeed of great importance in battle, but strength should not lag behind them. After these words, the man grabbed the trunk of a thick tree with his hands and, using only brute physical force, tore it out of the ground by its roots. Wow! Naruto squeezed out admiringly, who saw something like this for the first time. A spark of interest in everything that was happening lit up his eyes. Before you start your training, I want you to understand something. Keith stopped grimacing, becoming as serious as possible. Training endurance and speed is not necessary for running away from enemies. The faster you are, the higher your chances of surviving a battle with a superior enemy. As a rule, very fast opponents do not have the necessary endurance, and very hardy ones do not have a good punch, and physically strong people are limited in their movements. In order to survive, you must fight. Stop running from problems, and learn to solve them already. These words echoed in the boy's head. Learn to solve your problems? This statement was spinning around in Naruto's head. Indeed, he always ran away from the crowd that was chasing him. For some reason, the idea of fighting back never crossed his mind. In fact, there were reasons for that. Well, it wasn't surprising. Could a child defeat an adult? This question could explain why Naruto had never thought of such a thing. In this world, everyone trains to become stronger. To survive, you have to surpass them all. Do you know how to do that, kid? Keith grinned smugly, watching the confused boy, who blinked his eyes in confusion. You just have to be harder than everyone else. Run until you want to spit out your lungs. Squat until your legs feel like wood. Push up so well that your muscles feel like lead. Do sit-ups until you feel like your internal organs are mixed up. Ha! Hatcher laughed loudly, although Naruto did not find anything funny in it. I'll die with such training, the boy mumbled, taking a few steps back. Inside, there was a desire to run away from this man, because he was talking about such terrible things. Naruto turned around, but did not have time to rush. The man's heavy hand pinned him to the ground, not allowing him to move. I'll make a man out of you, Keith whispered into the child's ear. Goosebumps ran down the child's spine, and his pupils involuntarily narrowed. He already regretted going with this man, and nothing had started yet. Several hours passed. Naruto had long since lost count. He was sweating profusely and his head was a complete mess. Keith sat under a nearby tree, carefully watching his charge's every breath, which was taken with great difficulty. Okay, kid, you can move on to push-ups. Noticing that Naruto's activity was rapidly declining, Hatcher waved his hand, allowing him to move on to another exercise. The boy turned his head to the man, grimacing at these words. Just you wait. When I get stronger, I'll kick your fucking ass. The child cursed mentally, trying to cope with the inhuman loads. Loading the body of 6-year-old Naruto like this was a real atrocity, but no one would know about it. At least, Keith was sure of the latter. Yes, I like this attitude. The man jumped up from his seat, which surprised the blonde. It turned out that the latter's face reflected everything he thought about his savior. He can read minds? What's going on? Naruto continued to diligently do push-ups, ignoring the pain in his muscles as fear began to fill his heart. An oppressive atmosphere hung over the abandoned training ground. If you want it so much, then get up. Let's have a demonstration sparring. These words clearly brought pleasure to Keith, but Naruto for some reason lost all his former mood. His soul just wanted to run away. The people who were chasing him did not look strong and dangerous. They were ordinary residents who did not devote time to training to improve their physical performance. But Keith, this was completely different. His body was only slightly emaciated, but nothing more. The tense muscles protruding from under the skin showed that this man's craft, one way or another, was connected with battles. Maybe we shouldn't? Naruto drawled with obvious doubt, seeing no point in this clash anyway. In general, the blonde tried to avoid fights, considering them to be something wrong. This was what his books taught him, and until yesterday he tried to adhere to it. We must. I have no intention of sparing you, but so be it, I will let you strike the first blow. It was not entirely clear whether this man was mocking or speaking in all seriousness, but these words with such a bloodthirsty grin were too terrible. What should I do? When they stood 10 steps away, the orphan asked nervously. This was Naruto's first experience in sparring, so he simply didn't know anything about it. Usually there should be some rules, but for you there won't be any. Just try to kill me, like you did with that one yesterday. Keith's eyes lit up with interest. That's when the boy flinched. He didn't ask questions about yesterday because he was afraid of punishment. Admit it, you liked it. You got pleasure from the sight of the dying man who hurt you. Naruto backed away, covering his ears with both hands. He didn't want to listen to these statements. No, that can't be. I'm not some kind of murderer or maniac. The boy shook his head nervously, muttering something under his breath. The image of the fat man killed yesterday stood before his eyes. You seem to need motivation for sparring. Noticing Naruto's dumbfounded state, Hatcher frowned. This wasn't quite what he expected. In an instant, he closed the distance between them. Grabbing Naruto by the hair, he slammed him into the ground. The pain instantly cleared the boy's thoughts. A clot of scarlet liquid burst out of his nose, and a disgusting taste of earth appeared in his mouth. Learn to cope with your feelings outside of combat, because your opponents will not wait for you to sort yourself out, Keith stated with coldness in his voice, lifting the boy to his eye level. Fuck you, Naruto growled, spitting dirt right into Hatcher's face. The blonde was clearly unhappy with such methods of training. Not only physical, but also mental influence was exerted on him. If Naruto could still come to terms with the first, since he had encountered him in the past, then the second was something new and much more unpleasant. The clouded look began to clear up due to growing rage. His eyes were bloodshot from helplessness and his own weakness. I'll kill you! In those seconds, Keith became the most hated person for Naruto, so he was ready to pounce on him without any sort of discussion. At that moment, a third person appeared on the training ground. She was wearing a fox mask. With a quick and precise blow to the back of Naruto's head, she knocked him out. Keith looked at the intruder with obvious irritation. He had almost achieved what he wanted, and now he was interrupted. Do you even realize what you almost did? The voice of the ANBU with the fox mask expressed extreme displeasure. Not all ANBU can withstand such training, and you are going to train a child like this? Are you out of your mind? The girl took out her tanto, preparing for battle. She was not a very experienced ninja, but her intuition literally screamed about the danger next to this man. Such a weakling dares to lecture me? Who do you think you are? Where did you drink the elixir of immortality? A fire of discontent lit up in Keith's black eyes. They acquired scarlet tones from an excess of bloodlust. The clanking of chains spread across the clearing, and curved blades appeared from under Hatcher's sleeves. The next day, Minato-sensei, I have come to report to you. Kakashi had spent the previous day closely examining the evidence from the bloody massacre. The panic caused by the appearance of some killer in Konoha had been prevented thanks to the prompt actions of ANBU. The families of the victims had been compensated and were urged to keep quiet about it. It was understandable that some people were unhappy with this state of affairs, so Root had been actively fighting the spread of rumors. What did you manage to find out? Taking a thick folder in his hands, the fourth Hokage grimaced. He didn't really want to bury his head in papers. Of course, this was a normal job for the ruler of a ninja village, but it was very boring. First of all, it is worth paying attention to the fact that among all the corpses, one stands out. The flesh has already come off, exposing the bones. He was clearly killed before everything happened. Presumably, this is Old Man Toru, who was well received by the residents of the neighboring houses. He disappeared about 6 months ago, and due to the absence of relatives, no one reported it to the police. Hatake paused briefly, giving his mentor time to think everything over. So, let's say, who was living in the basement all this time? Namikaze frowned at this news. His blue eyes pierced the student, demanding to continue. We don't know that yet, but I'll manage to find the bodies of 3 men outside the basement. They were killed in an alley nearby. The method of murder was slightly different from the other victims, but the examination showed a 50% similarity. The bodies were identified. We contacted their relatives, and then began the rapid process of identifying the other victims. At the moment, we know that they all gathered at a bar nearby, where they were celebrating the day of victory over the 9-tailed demon fox. Questioning the bartender and waitresses led us to the fact that they went on a hunt for the Jinchuriki, during which they were killed. Kakashi finished his report, bowing his head in respect. Naruto? No, the Jinchuriki is too young. He's only 6 years old, so he simply can't do something like that. And if he used demonic chakra, the sensors would have detected it immediately. The Hokage thought logically, so he quickly concluded that the child was simply not capable of it. I came to the same conclusion, sensei. Hatake admitted honestly, raising his head. It seemed a little strange to him that Minato was so informed, but he blamed it on the fact that the boy was the village's weapon. Yes, the villagers were killed with particular cruelty, and it would look like a Jinchuriki rampage, but the sensors did not notice any demonic chakra activity, and the ANBU squad watching Naruto did not report anything unusual. But I still plan to interrogate the boy tomorrow. Perhaps he saw or knew the killer. Kakashi emphasized, thereby saying that the investigation had not yet reached a dead end. That's not a bad idea. Naruto was taken into custody this morning, so you'll have a chance to interrogate him, Namikaze said, returning his gaze to the papers. He felt a little uncomfortable when the subject of the Jinchuriki came up and tried to change the subject. Perhaps it might seem normal to someone familiar, but Kakashi knew his mentor too well. Taken into custody? Did he do something? Hatake was clearly tense from this news. The thing is, he immediately arrived at the Hokage's residence to report on the investigation. He spent the last 24 hours questioning witnesses and searching for hot leads. Kakashi did a tremendous job, filtering out unnecessary information and attracting additional resources if necessary. Yugao went missing last night. Yuzuki. There was no report from her, so Raven went after her personally, but he couldn't find anything. She was assigned to spy on the Jinchuriki, and her disappearance seems very strange. Minato answered the question. Yes, this was secret information that was hidden from the people so that panic would not interfere with the investigation, but Namikaze trusted his student. In addition, Kakashi was leading a case in which Naruto was involved in one way or another, and the information he told could help him in the investigation. Yugao is missing? Hataki's eyebrow twitched at this news. The thing is, for some time he personally taught the girl all the skills that ANBU should have. The kunoichi was distinguished by her talent and patience, although Kakashi noted her excessive emotionality in some moments. I will interrogate the Jinchuriki right now, Kakashi quickly decided. No, you will go home. Minato looked at his student with a stern gaze. You have been working for 2 days without sleep. I will assign this to someone else, and you go home and rest. That is an order. Namikaze knew better than anyone how his best student could devote himself to work. He did not have anything against it in most cases, but sometimes Kakashi's diligence went beyond all bounds. On the one hand, Minato understood his student perfectly, however, on the other hand, he wanted Hataki to learn to trust other shinobi, otherwise it was unlikely that he would ever be able to become a leader. Yes, Minato-sensei. Kakashi wasn't in the habit of arguing with his mentor, so he simply obediently accepted the new order, disappearing into the Shunshin leaves. Chapter 3. Sometimes in the darkest night we find light. In the interrogation room, where every question is a step into the unknown, composure becomes not just a defense, but a reflection of an internal struggle. Excuse me, when will they let me out? Naruto started the conversation with every person in a strange mask with this very question. The last thing the boy remembered was the dull rage that came from the depths of his soul. He had never been as angry as he was then. And no, he did not open his eyes immediately during the interrogation. Waking up in a warm bed, Naruto did not really have time to look around, as these strange people burst into his new abode. They rather roughly twisted him, after which they took him to some distant corner of the village of the Leaf. In fact, this was the first time the child found himself in such a situation. He did not know how to behave, and just wanted to quickly return to the warm bed from which he was pulled out, because his muscles were mercilessly aching since yesterday. Look, I just need answers to the questions I asked, that's all. Answer, and you'll be free. Such a friendly tone of the interlocutor was a little unusual in these walls. The soft voice of the interlocutor was mesmerizing, literally forcing Naruto to talk. All right. Let's just hurry up. Naruto smiled widely, feeling the changed atmosphere in the interrogation room. The ANBU in the Raven mask was pleased with this development. It was unlikely that even the most genius child would be able to play his role so well, and even if it were possible, then during the conversation the experienced ninja was determined to catch the liar in a lie. So what were you doing yesterday, Naruto? A barely noticeable burst of chakra, after which the ANBU's gaze changed in an instant. It was almost unnoticeable for a 6-year-old boy, but if he had been more knowledgeable, he would have immediately guessed that his interlocutor belonged to the Uchiha clan. I was training, Naruto said emotionally, which surprised Raven a little. His eyebrows under the mask closed, but the Jinchuriki couldn't see it. Naruto, you haven't manipulated chakra, have you? The member of the special unit reporting personally to the Hokage asked very carefully. In fact, if it had been anyone else in Raven's place, he would hardly have asked such a question, which was of no help at all in interrogating the suspect. Chakra? What is that? The blonde tilted his head to the side, showing his sincere lack of understanding. Raven mentally exhaled from these words. The boy was clearly not aware of chakra, which meant he simply could not use it. If you feel warmth inside your body, don't try to release it. Okay? Uchiha spoke seriously, trying to show the child that he was worth listening to. Why did Raven act like that? The thing was that, looking at Naruto, the image of his younger brother, whom he loved with all his heart, popped up in his head. Well, Naruto looked at his interlocutor differently. For some reason, in this simple gesture of concern from the masked man, he saw something that was threatening. Okay, he still finished without such a pronounced enthusiasm. So how did you train, Naruto? Uchiha, of course, noticed these changes in the Jinchuriki, but did not show it in any way, trying to maintain the same rhythm of the conversation. He simply could not ignore Naruto's training, because there was no information about it in the reports of his colleagues. In addition, the use of chakra at an early age could lead to various diseases. Such training could only be carried out under the supervision of a good medical ninja, and not everyone could afford such a luxury. Some influential clans could provide only 2 or 3 geniuses with such, and the rest had to be content with standard clan training. Well, I did push-ups, squats. The kid started counting off the things he did during his workouts with Keith on his fingers. He'd be lying if he said he enjoyed all that violence against his body. The only reason he kept doing set after set during that workout was because he didn't want to be helpless. Good, you're doing well. Raven, who began to feel that he was losing control in the conversation with Naruto, because he began to behave even less emotionally, decided to praise him. The blonde did not react to this at all. This was the first serious wake-up call for Raven. All children his age love praise, but he... What's wrong with him? Flashed through the Uchiha's thoughts, but out loud he said something completely different. And the last question, the Inbyu paused, putting a photo of a girl with straight purple hair and brown eyes on the table. Do you know this person? Taking the photo of the missing beauty in his hands, Naruto thought seriously, trying to remember at least someone with a similar appearance. No, I see her for the first time. After a minute of silence, the blonde gave a sincere answer, putting the photo back on the table. Okay, I'll walk you home. Raven stood up, wanting to continue the conversation in a more informal setting. The Jinchuriki stood up from the table, following the adult. Home? This question was spinning in his head, which is why he calmly followed the man he didn't particularly trust. A minute later they were on the street. Uchiha wanted to pick up the child in his arms to speed up their movement, but he did not have time to do so. Raven-san, we have news. A couple of meters away from them, another mask-wearer appeared, bowing his head in a sign of respect and reverence for the skills of the interlocutor. Wait for me a little bit. Raven asked, turning to Naruto, who nodded slightly, almost completely immersed in his thoughts. What happened? Taking a few steps to the side, Uchiha spoke in his usual manner. His cold voice unpleasantly cut the ears of unprepared people. Yugao Yuzuki was found in the Hyuga district. She was taken to the hospital in serious condition. Doctors do not give a positive prognosis. The subordinate spoke quickly, clearly, and strictly to the point. With each word, Raven frowned more and more. I'm going to the hospital. I expect a detailed written report from you within a couple of hours. Raven spoke in a serious tone, then turned to the boy, wondering what to do with him. The situation with him was rather questionable. He hadn't managed to extract any useful information from the child, but he couldn't keep him in the interrogation room now. Yugao had been found, and she was alive, and the threads connecting the boy to her were too dubious. We need to approach the problem differently, flashed through Raven's mind. Oh, little one, what are you doing here? When Uchiha was about to ask one of his subordinates to take Naruto home, a stranger with black hair and a wide smile appeared from around the corner. Keith was decisively approaching the trio. His words brought the boy out of his thoughts. Keith! The Jinchuriki jumped up, running towards his sponsor. Lights lit up in his eyes. There was so much he wanted to know, but he turned his head back, looking at the pair of mask-wearers. After several hours of interrogation, a lot of wasted nerves and a ruined mood, Naruto did not feel an ounce of trust in these people. Ahem, excuse me, but you are Keith Hatcher? Uchiha quickly approached them and asked. He had studied the Jinchuriki case in detail, and the man in front of him aroused considerable suspicion. There was extremely little information about him, and even the information that Raven managed to collect in the shortest possible time could not be called reliable, because it was mostly at the level of rumors. Yes. And why did you detain my ward? Hatcher spoke in a monotone voice, but there was something about it that made him seem like a formidable opponent. There was a small chance that he could be a valuable source of information. Uchiha spoke calmly, but his hands kept reaching for the weapon on his belt. A strange premonition of danger settled somewhere in the mask wearer's soul. Okay, but since you're done, can I have him? Keith tried to act as natural as possible, and he did it well. His instincts, honed in dozens of fights, literally screamed that he had a worthy opponent in front of him. If the circumstances of their meeting were different, Hatcher would have definitely pounced on his interlocutor, wanting to test his skills on him. Itachi forced a nod, afraid to make any sudden movements. In all fairness, this man should have been arrested, but there was no reason to do so. He was clean before the law. Moreover, the Sharingan swirling in his eyes was able to draw a strange conclusion. Keith Hatcher did not look like a shinobi or a samurai. His chakra circulation system was practically undeveloped, and the volumes were comparable to those of ordinary people. We need to gather more information about him. Itachi made a note to himself, then headed towards the hospital. He needed to personally verify Yugao's condition. Listen. After a couple of minutes, when Keith was sure that no one was watching them, he spoke in his usual manner. His cold voice unpleasantly cut the ears of unprepared people. Yugao Yuzuki was found in the Hyuga district. She was taken to the hospital in serious condition. Doctors do not give a positive prognosis. The subordinate spoke quickly, clearly, and strictly to the point. With each word, Raven frowned more and more. I'm going to the hospital. I expect a detailed written report from you within a couple of hours. Raven spoke in a serious tone, then turned to the boy, wondering what to do with him. The situation with him was rather questionable. He hadn't managed to extract any useful information from the child, but he couldn't keep him in the interrogation room now. Yugao had been found, and she was alive, and the threads connecting the boy to her were too dubious. We need to approach the problem differently, flashed through Raven's mind. Oh, little one, what are you doing here? When Uchiha was about to ask one of his subordinates to take Naruto home, a stranger with black hair and a wide smile appeared from around the corner. Keith was decisively approaching the trio. His words brought the boy out of his thoughts. Keith. The Jinchuriki jumped up, running towards his sponsor. Lights lit up in his eyes. There was so much he wanted to know, but he turned his head back, looking at the pair of mask wearers. After several hours of interrogation, a lot of wasted nerves and a ruined mood, Naruto did not feel an ounce of trust in these people. Ahem, excuse me, but you are Keith Hatcher? Uchiha quickly approached them and asked. He had studied the Jinchuriki case in detail, and the man in front of him aroused considerable suspicion. There was extremely little information about him, and even the information that Raven managed to collect in the shortest possible time could not be called reliable, because it was mostly at the level of rumors. Yes. And why did you detain my ward? Hatcher spoke in a monotone voice, but there was something about it that made him seem like a formidable opponent. There was a small chance that he could be a valuable source of information. Uchiha spoke calmly, but his hands kept reaching for the weapon on his belt. A strange premonition of danger settled somewhere in the mask wearer's soul. Okay, but since you're done, can I have him? Keith tried to act as natural as possible, and he did it well. His instincts, honed in dozens of fights, literally screamed that he had a worthy opponent in front of him. If the circumstances of their meeting were different, Hatcher would have definitely pounced on his interlocutor, wanting to test his skills on him. Itachi forced a nod, afraid to make any sudden movements. In all fairness, this man should have been arrested, but there was no reason to do so. He was clean before the law. Moreover, the Sharingan swirling in his eyes was able to draw a strange conclusion. Keith Hatcher did not look like a shinobi or a samurai. His chakra circulation system was practically undeveloped, and the volumes were comparable to those of ordinary people. We need to gather more information about him. Itachi made a note to himself, then headed towards the hospital. He needed to personally verify Yugao's condition. Listen. After a couple of minutes, when Keith was sure that no one was watching them, he spoke in his usual manner. Naruto, patiently waiting for approval from the only person who treated him more or less normally, raised his head, showing that he was ready to listen. Be careful with that in the crow mask. It seems that he has some kind of unhealthy interest in you, so let me know about the conversation with him if anything happens. Hatcher warned the small child with some admonishing notes. I also found this uncle strange, Naruto admitted, touching his chin with his fingers. Yes, he didn't understand half of the words flying from his interlocutor's lips, but he got the main message quite accurately. You need to stay away from people in masks. You have a good instinct. You'll soon pass me too, Keith said mockingly, raising his head to the sky. The sun illuminated his pale skin. Hatcher was clearly not the kind of person who often walked the streets. I still have a lot to learn to survive. The Jinchuriki's cryptic answer made Keith think hard to understand what exactly he was talking about. In fact, during the interrogation, the boy was able to guess who saved him back then, on October 10th. He was able to deal with one person, but those two would clearly not leave him alive, so, given one of the conversations with Keith, the conclusion had long been obvious. It was just that Naruto, due to his age, could not immediately realize and accept this completely. So you want to learn? Keith asked this question with an unusual slyness in his voice. Some kind of insidious plan had matured in his head, which Naruto, of course, knew nothing about. I need to move on. Without strength, it's simply impossible, the blonde declared with a determination that many adults did not possess. His blue eyes reflected a deep understanding of the essence of everyday things. Hee, and you have already succeeded, Keith laughed, ruffling the boy's hair with his hand. Naruto was embarrassed by such praise, and even blushed a little. This was the second time he experienced something like this, and oddly enough, he wanted it to happen again. Since you had such a quick epiphany, there is nothing more to hide from you. About a minute later, Hatcher calmed down and spoke in a more solid tone. This brought the boy out of emotional shock. He quickly switched to his guardian, preparing to listen to his words. The situation is quite simple and complicated at the same time. In a year, you will go to the Ninja Academy. You can do whatever you want with this, but you must go, otherwise you will lose your home. The man looked into the child's blue eyes, checking if he understood everything. Ninja Academy? Will it help me become stronger? Naruto's desire for power had taken over his mind, so he simply couldn't help but ask such a question. It was very important to him that his time was spent with maximum benefit. Honestly, I don't know, but you must understand that they will give you some knowledge there. Without your desire, this knowledge will not be transformed into strength and skills. Only your attitude will determine the answer to your question. Hatcher got out of the situation. He did not particularly like to dodge and lie, so he said it like it really is. I'll try, the Jinchuriki said decisively. During their last walk, he managed to drag Keith into a bookstore, but there was little joy in it. The prices for books were not small, and for the blonde, the numbers on the price tags increased at least 3 times. Good, his sponsor said in a reserved tone. This child has a great future. He just needs to be given a push, and then his spark will turn into a flame that will engulf everything. Hatcher thought, looking at Naruto's similar attitude. What is chakra? The boy suddenly remembered what the man in the raven mask had said and decided to find out if the only person who could be trusted knew about it. Chakra? They will tell you about it at the Ninja Academy. Just know that chakra is a shinobi tool. On the one hand, it elevates them above ordinary people, but this power also limits them. To become strong, it is not enough to simply learn how to use chakra. As soon as the time comes, you will understand everything yourself. Seeing the incomprehension in the blue eyes, the man decided not to dwell on it. He did not like to chew everything thoroughly, and this was exactly such a case. If the boy was destined to become a ninja, then he had to know everything about his main trump card. Okay. Having sensed the changed atmosphere in the conversation, Naruto didn't dare to continue asking questions on this topic, although he was terribly interested. So, you asked too many questions. Now we'll eat, and then you'll have some tough training. Keith showed that he was dissatisfied with all these questions. Indeed, this man was irritated by tiresome conversations, so he preferred to solve everything with his fists. But the training was just yesterday. Naruto was genuinely outraged by this news. The pain in his muscles had not gone away, and he knew that with such loads he could damage them too much. This would lead to the fact that he would not be able to train at all. So what? Pain shouldn't stop you. Just grit your teeth and train. The guardian barked, scarlet sparks of irritation starting to light up in his eyes. The Jinchuriki bit his lip. Memories of the past immediately popped up in his head, when he ended up in the hospital, where a kind nurse advised him not to overexert his body and even explained why. Okay. Naruto bit his tongue and decided to believe Keith's words. After all, Keith, as it seemed to the boy, did not wish him harm, because if it were otherwise, he would not have saved him then, in the dark alley. That's great. And if I'm happy with your results today, then, okay, I'll buy you takoyaki. After this announcement, the boy's eyes lit up with a desire to prove himself. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to the training grounds quickly. The blonde literally took off, ignoring all the screams of Keith, who was left behind. Takoyaki was a sacred food for Naruto. He tried them only once, but remembered them for the rest of his life. The teacher at the orphanage gave these sweets to all the children about a year ago. Naruto did not remember the exact reason for this, but then he got this sweet, against which his everyday food paled. If the Jinchuriki had been a little more attentive, he would have noticed that after this incident his life at the orphanage became even more difficult, and that kind young teacher no longer appeared within the walls of the orphanage. Minato carefully read Kakashi and Itachi's report on the Yugao case. Yuzuki. With each line he read, his frown deepened. He felt that there was something strange about what was happening. On the table nearby was the file of the recent massacre. Naruto is indeed involved in both incidents, but only indirectly. It could just be a coincidence, but I don't think so. Putting the documents on the edge of the table, Namikaze began to think. The marks on the bodies of the dead and on Yugao's body do not match at all. Most likely, two different people did this. The fourth Hokage quickly came to a certain conclusion, but he was still tormented by vague doubts about the correctness of his judgments. "All!" the blonde roared loudly. "I'm here, Hokage Dano." Falling to one knee and bowing his head, Owl was ready to listen attentively to his leader's new order. "I have an important mission for you. You must conduct 2 weeks of surveillance on the Jinchuriki. Your task is to identify signs of deviation from normal behavior." Minato's blue eyes had a lordly gleam of steel. In addition to the 2 cases related to his son that had appeared, the outlines of incompetence in some of his subordinates had begun to emerge from under the water. If all this was confirmed, then the issue with such individuals was quite short. "Yes, Hokage Dano." The Anbu in the owl mask did not argue. He simply disappeared in a body flicker technique, heading off to study the reports of his subordinates in detail. Unlike most ninja, he was good at reading between the lines, so he acted with his usual composure when it came to his home. "Wait a little longer, Naruto. You will know the truth soon. I hope you will be able to accept it. I believe that you will be able to cope with what is inside of you." Minato rose from his chair and walked over to the window. Outside, several children were playing tag. They were having a lot of fun and looked happy. A sad smile appeared on the fourth Hokage's face. He had mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, watching this, a warm feeling appeared inside, reminding him that everything he did was not in vain, that there were positive consequences to all his actions. But on the other hand, it brought back difficult childhood memories, connected with his clan, his father, and everything he had experienced in his early childhood. Contrary to popular belief, he was not born in ideal circumstances. His birth took place in far from the most favorable environment. It was closely intertwined with two events. One was remembered by many as the rise of the legendary Trinity of Konoha, while the other was not mentioned at all. This story was taboo, due to the shame of all the hidden villages participating in those events, but Minato remembered those events very well, and they echoed as an unpleasant tingle in his heart. Hard times give birth to strong people create easy times. Easy times give birth to weak people create hard times. It was this phrase, confirmed by bitter experience by Namikaze himself, that became the reason for his unnatural actions. He went against himself, against his wife, siding with the elders and the council of clan leaders, but all his actions were based on raising a worthy successor on whose shoulders the burden of the ruler could be placed. The world is expecting great changes. It's a pity that you, my old friend, will not see it. Raising his eyes to the setting sun, Namikaze remembered the closest person who had played the role of mentor and friend for many years. The man could not allow himself to be nostalgic about the past for long, so a minute later he returned to the documents. His responsibilities not demanded delays.